I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while now because of how many great anime comes out every year. But in the last couple of years, I wasn't sure if I've seen enough to justify a video like this. But this year there were so many great shows that I've watched, so I thought it'd be a good year to do a ranking of every anime I've seen from least favorite to favorite. Keep in mind that there's a lot of anime from 2022 that you probably won't be seeing on this list. That's either because I haven't seen it yet or just aren't interested in it, so sorry if I don't mention anything you might have enjoyed. I'll do my best to avoid spoilers for what I talk about in case you haven't seen some of these yet. But before I get into my favorite shows, here's everything that either dropped or haven't finished yet from 2022. The Devil is a Part-Timer Season 2. The Devil is a Part-Timer isn't the best show I've seen, but it was a show that I had a lot of fun with, and I was looking forward to the second season. And I've only seen a couple episodes of the latest season, so maybe I'm judging it prematurely, but I was very disappointed with what I saw. It had some decently funny moments, and I wouldn't call it bad, but I don't remember the show being this boring. It admittedly has been a while since I've watched the first season, but I remember it being very enjoyable throughout. But with season 2, I just found myself gradually losing more interest the more I watched it. And from what I hear, it doesn't get that much better, so I dropped it after only a couple episodes. Like I said, it isn't really bad in any way I can think of, just very average and forgettable. Summertime Rendering. This seemed like the perfect show for me since I love time travel and mystery stories, and I'm only 15 episodes in, so maybe my thoughts will change when I finish it, but I haven't been too impressed with it so far. I wouldn't say that there's much wrong with this series, but so far it doesn't feel like it's done enough to set itself apart from other time travel stories I've seen. Whenever I watch it, I can't help but think back to similar stories that have similar concepts but are handled in much more interesting ways. I also don't really feel interested in any of the characters. None of them are bad, but I can't say I care about them enough where it feels like I care about how they're able to prevent their unfortunate fates. And I wouldn't mind this as much if I was at least interested in the mystery aspect, but I can't say it interested me that much either. It's not that it does anything wrong, but it didn't really have anything to hook me. I'm hoping this is one of those mystery shows that starts out slow only to become much better, but at the same time, I felt interested in the mysteries of plenty of other time travel stories from the start, which I can't say about Summertime Rendering. Spy X Family. I'm not sure if my thoughts will change on this show if I catch up to it, but from the few episodes I've seen, this is such a fun show. The show uses a lot of tropes I've seen in other stories, but manages to use them in a fun way that feels fresh. It helps that the main three characters are just so fun to watch, so much so that despite the story not always being the most original, you're almost always having fun because of how entertaining the characters are and seeing how they react to different situations. I really hope that this series doesn't get too repetitive or anything later on, because so far I'm having a great time with it. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean. I've actually read the Stone Ocean manga before. I don't remember feeling too strongly about it, but I also don't remember well in general, so I was looking forward to revisiting it via the anime. And I'm only a few episodes into Stone Ocean, but so far it has one of the strongest starts of a JoJo's part in my opinion. The characters so far have been enjoyable. Even if I don't have too much to say about them, they definitely feel unique compared to previous characters, but so far they aren't the most interesting. The new setting was one of the more unique ones in JoJo's, taking place almost entirely in a prison. I really enjoyed this setting, and so far it has allowed for plenty of creative stand fights that manage to feel unique from the fights we've seen in this series. My favorite one so far would have to be the one with John Gallier. Such an entertaining and creative fight that both create a good amount of mystery around the antagonist and shows a more vulnerable side of some of the characters when placed in this tense situation. Even having read the manga, this part was just as impactful. I really hope that the remaining episodes of this part can stay this good, since if it does, it could be one of my favorite parts in the whole series. Well, that was everything I haven't finished, so now let's get into my favorite anime of 2022. Number 8. Demon Slayer Entertainment District Arc. Although this season isn't anything amazing in terms of writing, it's some of the most fun I've had watching an anime this year. The animation for this arc is some of the best I've seen, and was a big part in why this arc works so well. I never really found the slower, more character-focused parts of Demon Slayer too compelling, so I'm glad that they dedicated a large part of this season to just action, which I feel is what this show does best. We get introduced to Uzui, who's definitely my favorite character so far. They have such a fun personality, and the action scenes with them were insanely well done. As for the rest of the characters, they still aren't anything amazing, but they were just good enough to make me feel invested in the fights besides them just looking good visually. I'll admit, I felt disappointed by the Mugen Train arc, but this season kind of got me excited for Demon Slayer again, and I'm looking forward to when it comes back this year. 8 out of 10. Number 7. Bleach, Thousand Year Blood War Arc. Bleach was one of the first manga I've read, and was one I enjoyed a lot despite its flaws. And I was looking forward to watching the new season since this anime is coming back after so long. And while I wouldn't call this my favorite arc of Bleach because of Soul Society, it's still a very good arc. For one thing, the action in this season was great. It was really well animated, the soundtrack was as great as always, and a ton of the fights were pretty satisfying due to how long this story has been building up certain characters. We also get a ton of reveals about the world of Bleach that I mostly enjoyed. We get a lot of flashbacks this season where we learn more about some of the Soul Reapers, a lot more about the Quincy's, and yet again get more reveals about Ichigo. My favorite of these flashbacks and my favorite episode of the season would have to be Everything But the Rain. Not only was it a fun episode with some great character interactions, but it gave us plenty of really interesting reveals and even had a bit of action. While I had minor gripes with all my other favorite episodes of this season, this one felt like it had everything, and I really enjoyed it. Admittedly, not all the twists in this season worked for me, and some of the emotional moments didn't hit me as hard as I would have liked. But this is a series that I haven't seen in a while, so I imagine rereading it would improve my enjoyment of this season significantly. But even then, this was a great season, and I'm really excited for the next one. 8.2 out of 10. Number 6. Kaguya-sama Season 3. Season 3 of Kaguya-sama was probably the weakest one for me. That being said, it's Kaguya-sama, so it's still a very good season. The first 2 episodes were pretty strong, and that season finale was very satisfying. But a lot of the episodes in between, although were good, I just didn't find them as consistently funny or enjoyable as previous seasons, and I'm not quite sure why. The only exception I can think of in this middle section were the scenes with Maki, who after this season is one of my favorite characters in the show. I just love her personality, and they have so many hilarious moments. I was surprised to see that some people don't like her character, since for me she was probably my favorite part about the season. But like I said, despite not finding it as good as the previous 2 seasons, this is still a pretty fun season that handles one of the biggest turning points in this story really well. 8.3 out of 10. Number 5. Mob Psycho 100 Season 3. While Season 2 is still my favorite season of Mob Psycho, Season 3 comes pretty close. I was wondering how much farther this story could go after Season 2 and how they'd be able to wrap everything up. And I'm glad to say this season gave a very satisfying conclusion to the story. It felt like every loose end and character arc was wrapped up very well here, even for the characters I didn't expect to get closure for, like the members of the Telepathy Club. Also, the animation for this show was amazing as always. My favorite animated episode would have to be episode 8, where the Telepathy Club goes on a trip to the mountains. That last scene, without spoiling, was one of the most surreal and impressively animated sequences I've seen. And I'm glad to say that the show nailed the landing with its final arc. Not only was it very exciting due to how much action there was, but due to seeing the culmination of so many character developments was so satisfying. There were some parts that did feel a bit weird to me, but I think it did enough right to be considered an extremely satisfying ending to one of my favorite shows. 9.6 out of 10. Number 4. Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Despite all the hype for Edgerunners, I kind of got the feeling that I might not enjoy it that much, but I chose to check it out anyway because of how much it was recommended to me, and I'm glad to say that I was very wrong. In only 10 episodes, Edgerunners manages to do so much with its setting and characters. I can think of few shows that manage to immerse me in their setting as much as Night City. It was such a bleak setting, yet they managed to balance this tone really well with more comedic and over-the-top moments you can expect from an anime. It also helps that the presentation of this show was so well done. From start to finish, the show looks beautiful. And they used music from the Cyberpunk game so perfectly that it almost felt like this music was made with the anime in mind. It also might have the best anime dub I've ever heard. The voice acting felt so natural and suited every character perfectly. And without spoiling, that final episode was one of the best endings I've seen in a while. I've seen reasons that people hated the direction it took and found it unsatisfying, but the things that people hated about it were the reasons I loved this ending and found it so powerful. The only significant flaw I can think about is that some of the plot developments feel a bit rushed, but at the same time they all made sense the more I thought about them, and it definitely felt like they chose the right place to end this story. So despite this flaw, I still think this is an amazing miniseries and one of my favorites of the year. 9.6 out of 10. Number 3. Chainsaw Man Season 1. I went into the first season of Chainsaw Man not expecting too much, since I don't remember feeling too strongly about the earlier arcs, but this season not only reminded me of how great the first few arcs were, but in some ways improved upon them with the incredible adaptation. It's been a while since I've been this impressed with an anime's direction, from the fight scenes to the conversations to the scenes where not much is happening. The direction is so strong and perfectly captures the tone each scene is going for. Also, the soundtrack is just incredible. It reminds me of the composer's work on Devilman Crybaby and A Silent Voice with how well the music works for both the brutal and intense action sequences, along with the quiet and more emotional moments. This combined with the amazing direction make the whole thing feel so cinematic. Also, the voice casting for this show was on point. Almost every voice actor felt like they suited their characters perfectly. But besides the incredible presentation, the story itself is really compelling. It's a very chaotic and brutal series where no one truly feels safe. But despite this, it manages to balance these bursts of chaos really well with moments of comedy and genuine emotion. It's so impressive how it balances different tones in a way that adds to the chaotic feeling but without feeling jarring. And I think the first episode to truly put on display all this show's strengths was episode 8, which I feel most people can agree is when this show really starts going. The first 7 episodes were great already, but this one takes it to another level. From here on out, the stakes are much higher, we see new sides of the characters we thought we understood, and the series never feels quite the same after this. I was not expecting to enjoy the earlier arcs of Chainsaw Man this much, so the fact that my favorite arcs have yet to be animated just leaves me extremely excited to see this amazing manga get fully adapted. 9.6 out of 10. Number 2. Made in Abyss Season 2. I read the manga for Made in Abyss a while ago, so I knew that this season was going to be really good. But I almost forgot how amazing this arc was, and paired with the incredible music, animation, and voice acting, it made for an amazing season that cemented Made in Abyss as one of my favorite shows of all time. We get introduced to a lot of new characters that I really enjoyed, and I found just as, if not more compelling than the main cast, and it makes the terrible things that happen to them all the more devastating. The world building for this season is as incredible as always. The new setting, without spoiling, was so interesting, having some really cool concepts and managing to somehow make this series even more messed up than it was before. From the start, we can see this season take a much darker direction from what we've seen in previous arcs, and it just manages to get even more brutal and harrowing the more it goes on. It's one of the most hard to watch shows I've seen, but because of how good it is. This show has yet again impressed me with how incredible the world building and characters are, and it leaves me wondering how this series can possibly top itself after this. But if it did, I wouldn't be surprised. 9.9 out of 10. Number 1. Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 2. This and Season 3 Part 2 are tied with being the peak of Attack on Titan for me. This has everything I could want from this show, and in my opinion did an amazing job at adapting the already good source material. The show has taken its time setting up its many storylines, and in this season we're finally seeing payoff for so many of them. This especially shows in episodes 3 to 5, which have some of the best writing in the entire show. We get so much plot twists and payoff that have not only been meticulously built up to throughout Season 4, but since the very beginning of the story. But besides the amazing twists, this season does everything else really well. We also continue to get plenty of great character development that really humanizes the cast and makes us care about them despite the many terrible things they do to each other. And this is without mentioning the amazing action that in my opinion was Mappa's best work on the show so far. This especially shows in the penultimate episode of the season, which has some of the best animation of the entire show. And if all these things weren't good enough, the season finale absolutely blew me away, perfectly using flashbacks to balance some of the happiest moments we've seen in a while with some of the darkest and most gut-wrenching. There's just so much I loved about this season. Although not as consistently exciting as earlier seasons, the writing here is some of the show's best, balancing great character development, mind-blowing plot twists, and impactful emotional moments. There are minor gripes I could give about certain plot points or the pacing, but when I found nearly every aspect of this season so gripping, I can easily forgive it for that. And for all these reasons, the latest season of Attack on Titan was my favorite anime of the year. 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching this video. I was planning on putting it out by the end of 2022, but it took a lot longer than I expected. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and comment telling me what you thought about the video or the shows I've mentioned. Admittedly, I haven't been posting for a while due to a lack of inspiration I've been having, but I've got a lot of video ideas, and I'm aiming to at least put out one video per month this year. So if you'd like to see more from me, subscribing would be very appreciated. Anyways, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.